Good afternoon and welcome you all to Session 3 of Faculty Development Program on Implementation of National Education Policy 2020, organized by ATME College of Engineering, Mysuru. I am Nasreen Fatima, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering. So we are going to start with Session 3 and the speaker for Session 3 is Lakshmi Narasimhan Raghavan, Head of Business Strategy and Planning, Nokia. I request Mr. Ramchandra, Assistant Professor, Department of Physics, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, madam. Hello, good afternoon to all. Greetings of the day. I, Ramachandra MN, Assistant Professor, Department of Physics, ATME College of Engineering, have immense pleasure and delighted to introduce versatile Haxity Shri Lakshmi Narasimhan Raghavan. Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan Raghavan is a Mysorean, pursued education till professional qualification in Mysuru before taking the plunge to pursue professional goals and aspirations. Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan is a qualified chartered accountant and a fellow member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He is also a qualified certified public accountant from Australia. He has also earned various certifications on subjects like leadership, digital strategy from MIT, behavioral economics from University of Toronto, etc. He is a Marshall Goldsmith certified executive and team coach. Sir has over 23 years of professional experience in diversified roles across large multinational corporations. As a seasoned finance leader, he has helped business and people succeed and scale. He has been a trusted business advisor and a strong business enabler with demonstrated thought leadership, supporting business transformations, driven operational excellence, has built strong teams and developed and mentors leaders. He started his career in Denso Kirloskar, later joined Oracle and contributed for close to a decade, growing quickly in his career. In 2013, he joined Cisco India in leadership role, and before leaving Cisco, he was the chief finance officer of 500 million US dollars service provider business of Cisco India. Leadership opportunities came calling, and he joined Nokia Networks and Solutions, Singapore, as Chief Operating Officer Asia Pacific for Nokia software business. This was a critical business for Nokia's future growth and part of its key strategy. He was credited with turning around the business, driving the growth, working closely with the Asia Pacific Regional Vice President. He was the recipient of prestigious Nokia President Award for his contributions. He has also traveled extensively across the world on work assignments, meanwhile exposed to different cultures. After living in Singapore for 3 years, he is currently back in Bangalore on a corporate career break and has funded Abhigna Advisors, which is focusing on business, startup consulting, and executive coaching. Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan loves Carnatic classical music, being a percussion artist himself, also has keen interest in Indian culture, history, leadership, behavioral psychology, etc. On behalf of ATME College of Engineering, we are gratified to you, sir, for accepting our invitation and part of the program. I welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramchandra, sir.
Thank you.
Now I request Lakshmi Narasimha, sir, to take over.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ramchandra, for a fantastic introduction. Really appreciate. It is an absolute pleasure to be part of this forum. Being a Mysorean at heart, I am very pleased to be participating in an event organized by ATME Mysore. I thank the Honorable Chairman Arun Kumar, the Managing and Organizing Committee, Dr. Bhagyashree and her team for organizing this fantastic event and making me part of it. I heard the previous session by Swamiji with great interest. It has been a very inspiring and motivating to listen to his lecture. Learned a lot about the perspectives about importance of education. We have a lot more work to do there. Yesterday was a very important day, my dear friends. We celebrated the 125th birth anniversary of India. India's hero and great leader of independence, Sri Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. When you talk about leadership, it is so apt to remember the leadership of Netaji, from whom we all can learn many leadership lessons. He was enthusiastic, he was disciplined, he was selfless, an inspiring leader with strong confidence on his own capability, and a leader and a leader with a clear goal about independence of India. He exhibited development of decided, dedicated team, strong command, extreme coolness of mind, great judgment, and also demonstrated his clear vision, strong responsibility, and high risk-taking capability. And it's an absolute pleasure talking about leadership today. So I was tasked to talk about leadership excellence, and in a forum like this, when we are kind of rolling out national education policy, I was thinking probably it would be a little bit more apt to slightly modify the topic to talk about leadership in future. So what I have put a lot of slides together. Please have patience while we go through this. I'm kind of going to touch upon I have made the presentation into two sections. One is that talks about the leadership definitions, leadership evolution, leadership styles, and qualities of the great leaders. And the other section is going to talk about the future, right? What future lies for us, and what future lies for the next generation? What are the key trends that are shaping the future leadership challenges? What kind of mindset the future leaders should have, and the skills of a future leader, right? So then we will get to the conclusion part of it. So when I started looking at the definitions part of it, I was really thinking what would be the starting point of a leadership definition, right? We are a country with such a great history, which dates back to maybe 14,000, 15,000 years, right? And I was wondering, is there a definition that we all can look up to before we really start looking at the West for leadership definitions? So when I started looking and doing my research, I noticed a very important conversation that happened between Valmiki, sage Valmiki, and Narada in the Ramayana. These are the first verses of Ramayana where sage Valmiki meets sage Narada and asks him some of the key questions about the leadership. He has, I'm just quoting some of those verses here for your reference. I'm not going to read all of them. Basically, it says, "Kon vasmin sampratam loke gunavan kastaviryavan dharmagnasta kadagnasta satyavakyo dhravratah chartena chako yuktaha sarvabhuteshu kohitaha vidwan kaha kas samarthascha kaschaika priyadarshanaha atmavan ko tak prohoto dutiman Yuge." So he's asking all these questions. Who is Gunavan? Who is brave? Who has got the valor? Who has got highest level of gratitude? Who is honest? Who is truthful? So these are the questions that sage Valmiki is asking to Narada, and Narada responds to his questions in the subsequent verses, where he says, "Ishwa Vamsha Prabhavo Ramo Nama Janai Shrutah Niyatatma Mahavirya Dhyutiman Dhrutiman Vachi." So he keeps talking about all the qualities of a leader. And if you look at it, he talks about if you really look at the historical perspective, when we say leader is predominantly a king, correct? From there, if you have to apply the same concepts to the today's modern world of leadership, probably we would equate it to a leader, right? And so there are 7 verses that is there in Ramayana that actually talks about the qualities of a good leader, and it all goes back to Rama as a leader and his qualities. So here he gives a very beautiful explanation. He says he is Gunavan. Rama is Gunavan. He is principled, virtuous. Bibhyati Devesh. He is feared by even devas. He is dutyman, brilliant, non-jealous, truthful, competent, adept, knows everything, has got great character, excellent behavior. He is very courageous. He has mastered his anger. Very important quality, grateful. He is vigorous. He is very determined. He is persevering, conscientious, diligent, and he is benevolent to all living things. So these are the qualities that are, if you really recall, these are the qualities we really look up to in our leadership today, right? And this definition has been given thousands of years back to us. The only thing is we have not really looked within us and have not looked within our scriptures to find some of these definitions. Moving on further, there's one more conversation that happens between Rama and Bharata. Rama is in Vanavasa in Chitrakuta. Bharata comes back, comes to meet Rama and requesting him to take back the kingship. But Rama has already assumed that Bharata has already taken the kingship, and he is giving him the advice of what are the things he should not do, and how a leader should not be. And he also talks about, these are the verses from, Ayodhya Kandas, Sarga 100 and verses 65 to 70, which basically talks about, he's asking Bharata, are you truthful? Are you holding to your principles? Are you being criticized by the society or a group? Are you penalized by God? Are you depending? Are your friends cowards? Are all your people happy with you? He's covering all these aspects. These are the people who are not suitable to be leader. This is what is the definition he gives in Ramayana. It's very important. If you see today, we'll see a lot of people with these kind of behavioral traits which actually does not qualify to be a leader in our historical definitions, right? Let's look at Mahabharata. This is a situation where Bhishma is on the Sharashaya, and Krishna, Yudhishthira, all the Pandavas and other leaders and sages come to Bhishma and asking for his counsel. And Bhishma says to Krishna, you yourself is the Lord of the world. Why are you asking me to counsel them? And Bhishma says, your knowledge is immense. You have to counsel about the kingship and what are the qualities of the king. And Bhishma defines 36 qualities of a king, which basically covers the nature of the king, his intelligence, his intuition, his self-control, restraint, enthusiasm, etc. He says the king is a representative of the god, the Prajapati. The king should have to conduct very responsibly. Same way, the leader is the representative of his employees, so he has to conduct himself very responsibly. He should be truthful, trustworthy, and virtuous. Same applies to our leaders as well. He should be conscientious and simple, hospitable and merciful, pragmatic and unbiased. We talk about fairness quite frequently in our leadership discussions. Unbiased is very, very important quality. King should subdue his senses, self-control. He should be efficient, enterprising, energetic, and enthusiastic. He should conduct himself according to the situations. This we talk about as leader of the leadership style, right? Moving on, he further says, he should perform his prescribed duties. A leader should also perform his prescribed duties for the welfare of his employees, for his team. Should keep virtuous advisors, ministers. We always say we should always surround with smart people who are smarter than you. That is the new concept that has come around. A successful leader will always surround himself with the smart people. This is what Bhishma is saying. He should be a role model. We say leaders should be inspiring. King should always do good to his subjects. At the end of the day, the job of the king is to take care of his people. Same way, the job of the leader is also to take care of his people. He will apply strategy to ensure the organization is maintained well. Life of king is a mission dedicated to the well-being of his subjects. Life of a leader is mission dedicated to taking care of his people. Right? You can see the complete correlation between how a king should be and how a leader should be, right? And further he says he should be righteous. He also talks king should allow decentralization. That means we are talking about empowerment. He is empowering his teams. King should maintain and expand state. We talk about maintaining and growing the organization, maintain and grow the business. King's responsibility to maintain peace and order. Also it says there's a message to the followers, right? But these principles, my dear friends, it's not only between a king and his followers. This is applied to all the statesmen, the political leadership, the corporate leadership, the managers, head of the family, head of the village, whatever it may be, right? So beautifully articulated and so beautifully narrated by Bhishma Pitama. Let's move further. Let's look at Arthashastra. Arthashastra has some references. Chanakya defines 7 pillars for business success. He defines Swami, Amatya, Janapada, Durga, Kosha, Danda, and Mitra. If you apply the same to today's business parlance or today's leadership parlance, you can say the Swami as the leader, Amatya as the manager, Janapada as your market, Durga as your infrastructure, Kosha as your finance, which is very important, Danda, your championship team, and the Mitra, the mentor or your well-wisher. Chanakya says wisdom raises the quality of governance. The wisdom is the combination of theory and practice. It makes the ruler more capable and more efficient. Basically, the king has to be wise. Same way, the leader has to be wise. He talks about the leadership qualities. He has to be intelligent, dynamic. He should associate with elders. Very important. He says always the king should seek guidance from people who are more experienced than him. Same way, the leader also has to reach out to his mentors, his seniors to get the guidance. He should be truthful in speech, does not break promises. He should walk the talk. He should be always grateful. And training, very important. Continuous learning. Chanakya emphasizes on continuous learning of the leader, and he should always be easily approachable. Fantastic definitions that are coming out of our scriptures, my dear friends. Let's look at what our Indian leaders talk about in leadership definition. Mahatma Gandhi says, I suppose leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. He's talking about the importance of taking care of the people in leadership. Right? As a leader, it is important not to just see your own success, but focus on the success of others. It is taking everybody along with you. Right? Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, is saying it's not about leaders' success alone. He has to take everybody along. That is the definition of a good leader. Indra Nooyi, she was the former CEO of Pepsi company. She says leadership is hard to define and good leadership is even more harder. But if you can get people to follow you to the end of the earth, you are a great leader. That is the inspiring aspect that we touched upon previously. Leader has to be very, very inspiring, right? And Rajiv Suri, I have seen him in action in Nokia, in my Nokia days. Leadership is all about emotional intelligence. Management is taught while leadership is experienced. He's talking about leadership as an experience. Nainalal Kidwai, I'm taking some of the, not so many people, they are not in action today, but they are kind of made a lot of differences in their careers. Nainalal Kidwai was the first India head of HSBC, highly influential woman leader of our country. Leadership for me is investing in the people you hope to lead, supporting them through their tough times, connecting with them at a personal level, encouraging them to learn and grow, and having the humility to learn from them. She is talking about taking the people along, training them, helping them to grow. And finally, Swami Vivekananda talks about the man who has much ojas is the leader of man. It gives a tremendous power of attraction. When we say ojas here, it means the energy. The one who has the highest level of energy in terms of all aspects, both spiritual and physical energy, is the one who should be a leader, right? Let's look at some of the Western leadership definitions. If you really, if you can so easily connect the dots, it's all coming to, at the end of the day, about the leader, taking care of his people. It's at the end of the day, he's, helping the people to grow. These are the points, basically, you can see at a, major theme that is coming in these definitions. So Western leadership definition says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. It's all about inspiration. The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. Getting the people to do greatest things is the responsibility of a leader. A leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. So this is always about thinking about the people where they should be and helping them to get there and helping them to dream more. That is the key responsibility of a leader. Great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, always about the goal. Great leaders are teachers and not tyrants. They help their followers see and understand more. They inspire them to become more and motivate them to do more. Look at this, great leaders are teachers. Very, very important. So if you're talking, if you are all teachers who have been teaching all the future generation, so all of you have to be great leaders and help them to inspire and do something more in the national building process. It's a very simple definition that is put by the Peter Drucker. He's known as the father of management. He says the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. So whether he's a good leader or a bad leader is a different conversation. Whether he's an effective leader or ineffective leader is a different conversation altogether. The moment you think you have a follower, you are a leader. Hitler had followers. At the same time, Seeping has followers, Mussolini had followers, but they were not. They were all, they were all predominantly leaders who are not really seen in a great, positive side of leadership, right? So the common theme, what do we see as a common theme in this all these definitions? It's all about leaders has to be effective, has to be continuously learning. There's a development. He has to be great. He has to lead. There are a lot of definitions that are coming up. This is one of the most researched and complex topics. Leadership is one of the most researched and complex topics, probably if you look at last 100 years. And there are hundreds of definitions and hundreds of qualities that are being kind of quoted about leaders, right? But at the end of the day, what is one single point that define a leader is it's all about people. We are the one. It's all about the people. You have to take care of the people. You have to make sure you inspire the people. You need to make sure that you grow the people and take them to where they are not actually dream them to do more and do more, right? Let's look at the leadership evolution. I'm touching on some of these aspects, my dear friends, is also because before we shift to the future aspects, it's very important for us to understand the history and the journey so far, so that we are able to connect and see where we are heading. Right? If you look at last 100 years of leadership, there were multiple evolution that has happened in terms of the leadership as a theory. Leadership theories have evolved. The way the business are run have evolved. If you look at predominantly the organization structures have evolved. If you look at between 1900, 1930 or 1940, it was predominantly hierarchy driven systems. Then it has this predominantly if you can connect it also a little bit of connection to the way America ran their businesses, right? And if you look at in 1960s and 1970, it's like great American dream. There are a lot of brands that actually came up, like Coca-Cola, Marlboro kind of businesses that came up. And as we move forward, as there were more innovation happened, as more leadership evolved, it was like it moved to entrepreneurial innovation. 1990, 2000, if you look at it, it's all predominantly communication, a lot of women in the leadership. It's all about to focus on the teams. Some of these concepts have evolved if you look at in last 100 years or so. If you look at from the process perspective, it was predominantly efficiency driven. It was all precise talks, procedures, standards, and very defined processes. From there was more interest in the Japanese culture of management, more about zero defects, Kaizen, Six Sigma kind of stuff that actually evolved. From there, 1970 to 1990, we looked at more at inspiring confidence. Jock Welch came out as one of the great leaders, and who was the CEO of GE. Then Alan Mulally, who came as another inspiring leader. And as we move forward, what we are today is kind of predominantly startup world, where it's like lead through your own purpose, and the purpose of organizations to truly motivate and align employees and customers around the needs of the world. This is a huge evolution, and it's actually is a very welcome change that we are seeing today in the leadership. So just further touching upon the leadership evolution from heroic to non-heroic, it's pre-industrial revolution. It was predominantly very individual, customized driven, approach. It was all very specific trade skills. People were very village centric. The pace of change was very slow. From there, we moved to 19th century, where the industrial revolution happened. Management was started developing it as a science. The people started thinking beyond their villages. Regional mentality cropped up, and some of the great inventions happened during this time. And also, one of the theory that got evolved during that time was a great man theory, right? And as we moved further to the 20th century, we moved to the mass production. We said, we a visible hand of people. We are, also the leaders started looking more visible. People regional mentality moved to national mentality, and optimization of the process. I touched upon the Kaizen and all the stuff. All those things evolved during 20th century, right? So, and also some of the leadership theories that we are talking about, behavior, theory, TRICE theory, or situational leadership theories. These are all evolved during this time. And as we move to 21st century, it is all massive past personalization. It's become too complex. The business has become too complex. Now we have moved from a national mentality to a globalist local mentality. We are saying world is one big city, and there's massive disruption happening around us, my dear friends. So the kind of description that we are seeing today is going to be slower than what we are going to see in the future. So in this kind of disruption, in this kind of situations like pandemic, which is once in a lifetime kind of situation, what we need is some of the theories like transformational leadership, servant leadership, agile leadership. Some of these leadership theories have evolved during these times, right? As we move to the next one, I will quickly touch upon the leadership styles. What is a leadership style? A leadership style refers to a leader's way of providing direction, implementing plans, and motivating people to achieve those plans. Your style describes how you lead. There are many different leadership styles. No one style is universal for all the situations. There are also a lot of leadership. You can evaluate your own leadership style. There are a lot of tools available online. Please go and check out, and it's a kind of fantastic information available out there. So let's look at some of the famous known leadership styles. Autocratic, authoritarian leadership. This was one of the initial days of leadership style, where we said leader is kind of making all the decisions, right? Leader makes all the decisions and directs the execution. He's involved in every aspect of execution, right? In every aspect of the business, I would say, right from planning till the execution. He discourages group input. He says his team, don't bring your brains, do what I tell you to do, right? So those kind of statements, if you hear, you can very clearly make out that it's an autocratic leadership that we are seeing here. And the environment is very highly rigid, very controlled workplace. It does not encourage team out of box thinking because people are not allowed to speak out. But it is not always have to be looked as a negative connotation, because there are situations where direct leaders have to make immediate decisions and urgent decisions. In those kind of things, I think autocratic leadership would work. But when something is practiced on a long term, that is where all this impact we will start seeing. And you'll also see some of those kind of connected leadership styles, which are kind of more directing, very permissive, paternalistic leadership styles also we see, which is kind of pretty much connected to this autocratic and authoritarian leadership. The next leadership style is participative, democratic, and facilitative leadership, right? It is pretty much democratic. The leadership style here is democratic. It says sabka saath, sabka vishwas. This you are taking everybody along, right? It is known to be a most effective approach because you are involving everybody, so everybody is going to pitch in, and everybody is going to contribute in the execution of the plan, and eventually everyone will succeed. So though the leader has the final say, but he will get the entire team involved, brainstorm, crowdsource ideas, and guides and directs the team. He encourages creativity, collaboration, team experience, team engagement, and motivation. These kind of things really work well in an R&D driven design and creative businesses, because there's a lot of discussion happens, and a lot of brainstorming happens in those kind of an environment. At the same time, in this kind of leadership style, the growth is also very fast. Recognition is there for the contributors, but only or the disadvantage, if at all you have to call, is it's very time consuming in a very fast paced environment. Probably this is not advisable style to be practiced, right? Next is delegative, hands-off leadership approach, where leader completely delegates the responsibility to the followers. He doesn't get involved in the day-to-day affairs, what he's doing. He gives no direction to his team. Lack of direction. Because of lack of direction, there is no cooperation amongst the team members. Lack of accountability. But at the same time, again, it does work in few teams. For example, Robert Noyce, who was the CEO of Intel during their initial days, he had given complete freedom to his team to come up with the product development that they were working on, the chipsets, etc. And the team really thrived. And if you really look at it, some of the leadership, some of the achievements that, there are Moore's law kind of stuff has actually happened during his time as the CEO of Intel. Moving next is transactional and transformational leadership. This is very transactional. When you say transactional leadership, basically it has got people perform their best when the chain of command is definite and clear. There are rewards and punishment to motivate workers. Obeying the instructions, commands of the leader is the primary goal of the followers. You will see a lot of these behaviors even today in some of those organizations. Subordinates need to be carefully monitored to ensure that the expectations are met. For example, athletic games, sales-related jobs are typically driven by transactional. You perform, you get rewarded. If you don't perform, you get fired. Right? As against that, the transformational leadership is predominantly charismatic and enthusiasm is used more. Leaders lay stress on the beliefs and values of the followers. It's a very proactive approach. It actually works very well in kind of turbulent environment where it's kind of when the environment is crisis driven, works to change the current conditions of an organization. It's more than one leader. There are multiple leaders in a transformational leadership scenario, and this promotes innovation and creativity in solving the problems. Henry Ford, whose operating business philosophy was to do more for the world than the world does for you, was his definition of success. By inventing and commercializing the automobile in America, process a process for dimension when observing the moving assembly line of meat packing plant. Ford changed the world in a way which even he was unlikely to have foreseen. Transformation leaders like Chandra, Ratan Tata, Mukesh Ambani, Azim Premji, Narayan Murthy, Jeff Bezos, John Chambers, all of these leaders have actually led their company in a very, very difficult times. And even for that matter, all the leaders who have led their companies in today's pandemic, hidden world is kind of really, transformational leaders. Situational leadership. So this is actually was first published by Hershey Blanchard model. This is called a Hershey Blanchard model. It was in 1950 by the management theories of Ohio State University. They said that surprisingly the leaders, the importance of the research cannot be overstated since leaders tend to have a dominant style, right? A leadership style they use in a wide variety of situations. Surprisingly, the research discovered that there's no one best style. Leaders must adjust their leadership style to the situation as well as to the people being led. If you really look back to the definition of, I brought from Ramayana, right? There also we say leaders has to adjust to the circumstances. In fact, choosing the right style at the right time in the right situation is a key element of a leader's success, right? But that's not what most people do. They have one style which is dominant in many situations, and that is where the challenges start. Next one, servant leadership. This is one of the most spoken leadership concepts of late. It means that the servant leader focuses on the growth and well-being of employees. The one of the oldest servant leader that we have ever known is Sri Rama. If you go back and look at the definition, he says, "Are you taking care of the people?" That is the question he asks to his people. He sacrificed his likes and dislikes for the happiness of his people. Right? Servant leaders seek to help the people serve, grow as individuals. And this is pretty much akin to transformation or democratic leadership styles, right? And this is like sabka ka saath, sabka vishwas, and leader actually works very hard to elevate his people to do more. Here's the definition on servant leader. Servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then conscientious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who leader first. Like very beautiful definition of servant leadership. Let's look at agile leadership. Agile leadership is another leadership theory that has really much spoken about. You will see a lot of talks in the management schools. Agile leadership is a leadership style that strives to remove roadblocks to success so that employees can be more effective and productive. It is like unblocking their obstacles and helping them to perform on their job. This is much required in today's situation. The leader has a very strong ability awareness, effectiveness, and adaptability to change. The leader has long-term outlook. He is kind of trying to build current to future. He is very smart, strategic, quick decision making. He is very confident and accountable. Communication and employment engagement, very key aspect of agile leadership, my dear friends, because the leader has to constantly be communicating with his team and making sure that the employees closely engaged in the organization. In fact, there was a survey that was done for more than 3,000 CEOs around the world, and they said agile leadership. They said 56% of the CEOs in the post-pandemic survey, they said that agile leadership is the top needed leadership skill today. Today is a world that is full of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Right? So in this kind of a situation, world has become more complex. It has become more dynamic, and they have the agile leaders have a very clear understanding of their internal and external environment in which they operate. They can anticipate and recognize when changes in the environment will impact them. They take longer term outlook and create connection between where they are today and where the organization wants to go. They have the ability to maintain effectiveness even when dealing with change and ambiguity. So they have phenomenal qualities. At the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the people are successful, unblocking their barriers, and making sure that they are able to perform in their job very well. So the next question: are managers and leaders are the same? Often these two terms are used very interchangeably, right? But the manager concept is predominantly driven from the concept of supervisor, which was predominantly a managing the process-driven concept. Today's the world is completely different. Leaders for the sake of simplicity, I would say that leaders may or may not be the managers, but all the managers have to be leaders because they have a team they are leading. Any organization that focus on building managers, it is clear that they will struggle with growing leaders. But what we need in today's world is leaders. When I talk to managers, I get the feeling that they are important. But when I talk to leaders, I get the feeling that I am important. Here is a very interesting talk by Simon Sinek, who is a very famous leadership speaker. He talks about the difference between the manager and leaders.
There are two things that I think that great leaders need to have: empathy and perspective. And I think these things are very often forgotten. Leaders are so often so concerned about their status or their position in an organization, they actually forget their real job. And the real job of a leader is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in our charge. And I don't think people realize this, and I don't think people train for this. When we're junior, our only responsibility is to be good at our jobs. That's all we really have to do. And some people actually go get advanced educations so that they can be really good at their jobs, accountants or whatever, right? And you show up and you work hard, and the company will give us tons and tons of training how to do our jobs. They'll show us how to use the software. They'll send us away for a few days to get trained in whatever it is that we're doing for the company. And then they expect us to go be good at our jobs. And that's what we do. We work very hard. And if you're good at your job, they'll promote you. And at some point, you're responsible for the people who do the job we used to do, but nobody shows us how to do that. And that's why we get managers and not leaders. Because the reason our managers are micromanaging us is because they actually do know how to do the job better than us. That's what got them promoted. Really what we have to do is go through a transition. Some people make it quickly, some people make it slowly, and unfortunately, some people will never make that transition at all. Which is we have to go through this transition of being responsible for the job and then turning into somebody who's now responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. And as I said before, one of the great things that is lacking in most of our companies is that they are not teaching us how to lead. And leadership is a skill like any other. It is a practicable, learnable skill. And it is something that you work on. It's like a muscle. If you practice it all the days, you will get good at it and you will become a strong leader. If you stop practicing, you will become a weak leader. Like parenting, everyone has the capacity to be a parent. Doesn't mean everybody wants to be a parent, and doesn't mean everybody should be a parent. Leadership is the same. We all have the capacity to be a leader. Doesn't mean everybody should be a leader, and it doesn't mean everybody wants to be a leader. And the reason is because it comes at great personal sacrifice. Remember, you're not in charge, you're responsible for those in your charge. That means things like when everything goes right, you have to give away all the credit. And when everything goes wrong, you have to take all the responsibility. That sucks, right? It's things like staying late to show somebody what to do. It's things like when something does actually break, when something goes wrong, instead of yelling and screaming and taking over, you say, try again. When the overwhelming pressures are not on them, the overwhelming pressures are on us. At the end of the day, great leaders are not responsible for the job. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. They're not even responsible for the results. I love talking to CEOs and say, what's your priority? And they put their hands on their hips all proudly and say, my priority is my customer. I'm like, really? You haven't talked to a customer in 15 years. There's no CEO on the planet responsible for the customer. They're just not. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the people who are responsible for the customer.
Very interesting point that he has made. At the end of the day, leaders are responsible for their people. Okay, let's moving on. What is that? Effective versus ineffective leadership. If you really look at, there was a survey that was done. Where people looked at what kind of impact an ineffective leadership strategy may have on some of the decisions or some of the aspect of the businesses or business challenges versus when you have an effective leadership strategy in place. Right. For example, if you look at the act decisively. If you had an ineffective leadership strategy, it says the impact is 19%, whereas if you same situation, if you have an effective leadership strategy, it goes up to 27%. Anticipating and reacting, it's kind of huge, 12 points up. Maintaining effectiveness, 23% to 33%, 10 points up. Same way, operating in a highly digital business environment, 16% to 24%. Look at this, responding to competitive environment, your ability to react to a competition goes up from 18% to 32%. Navigating through complexity, especially kind of a situation we are in, 23% to 32%. Understanding and acting, in terms of what's going on with the people and helping them to cope. It suddenly goes up from 21% to 37%. This is this huge impact that we are looking at here, my dear friends. So business challenges can be better managed when you have an effective leadership strategy in place. So let's shift the gears. We have touched upon the definitions. We have looked at some of the leadership styles, the evolution, and let's look at some of the key qualities of a great leader, right? Because this is very important. These are all the universal qualities. These are the universal qualities of the leader that will be always, applicable irrespective of the time. And whatever the qualities that we were required in 7,000 years back, that were applied to Rama, the same qualities are even being applied today, right? And those expectations will never go down, right? So let's look at some of the key aspects of a great leader. Leaders are made, not born. But if you look at the great man theory, it said leaders are born, not made. So this actually is very comforting, because as Simon Sinek, you heard him speaking, he said that this is a learnable skill, this is a practicable skill. So this makes our life so much better. This actually helps us. All of us can be leaders, because we often say that sarves bhavishye shrestha, everyone is good in their own way. So how do we really bring those leaders in you who can really make a difference in this world? Everybody is a leader in their own way. That's what we are saying, right? So we all have to leverage each other's strengths and and see how do we really make a difference in the world. And all these are learnable skills. That is what we are saying here. Leaders are visionaries. This is a very important point. Leaders are visionaries. Show me the leaders that the youth of your country look up to, and I will tell you the future of your country. This is a very famous quote. Great people stand out from others by their visions, not much by their intelligence. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, he once said, think about future, because no one is tasked with that responsibility. The responsibility of leader to think about future is multifold. Right? I want to tell you a story. Way back in 1880s, when Jamshedji Tata developed a belief that steel would be essential for India's development. He studies the industry thoroughly, visits various places in India where the iron ore deposits are available, and eventually went to Pittsburgh, which is known as the heart of steel industry in the US, to meet the metallurgical experts. There he was warned that it would cost a fortune and there was no guarantee that the endeavor would succeed. Because there was a lot of skepticism. Those were the days when British had made doing business in India very, very difficult for Indians. No, they are actually forcing us to import everything from, Britain. Sir Frederick Upscott was the chief commissioner of Indian Railways. He is famously quoted saying, "I will eat every pound of steel they succeed in making to British specifications." Jamshedji Tata was a great pioneer and a determined man. With immense faith in the enterprise, he forged ahead, turned Sakchi, it is the name of, which was the original name of Jamshedpur, as a smart intelligent city and with all amenities and built a world-class steel plant against all odds. Though it did not start producing steel during his lifetime, it produced steel after 8 years of his demise. His son Dorabji Tata, he succeeded and they started making steel rails per British specifications. Sir Dorabji Tata goes and demands Sir Frederick Upscott and tells him that if you had really lived up to your word, you would have had a slight indigestion. Now today, if you look at it, Tata Steel, actually they supported, actually the business grew very well, and it turned out to be, huge support during the World War One for the then government, British government. Today, if you look at Tata Steel is a $21 billion business, and it is growing. They have presence in 30 plus countries, more than 30,000 employees, and they're doing very well. This all happened, my dear friends, is because of Jamshedji Tata's vision in 1880s, and he took those pain to make sure that his dreams come true. The Tatas created their first airline, they created their first world-class hotel, they created their first electric and locomotives, right? So they have a lot of first. Their names also are the Birlas. They have done phenomenally well in, if you really look at them from the visionary perspective. Even for that matter, at ATME, your chairman, Mr. Arun Kumar, he established his institution with a purpose to make a difference in the education industry. Right? These are all the people who actually make the difference in the world, and we have to have great respect, and we need to support them wholeheartedly to make sure that we make a difference in the world and make a difference in the world and help them succeed. Moving on, leaders or strategists. Strategies can be simply defined as a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim or goal. Leaders would know best way to achieve the goals and what strategies would help them to get there. Strategic thinking means taking the long-term view, looking at the bigger picture, etc., etc. But how does this happen? Right? It is the practice of, there is something called teleological thinking, which means projecting forward and assessing all the different situations, and then looking at where we are today and acting upon it. Right? We see many such leaders in the history. One such leader is our own Shivaji Maharaj. He was known for guerrilla warfare. He had a phenomenal understanding of the geography of the battleground. He would consider various things that would go wrong in the mind. He had what could be the strategy of the enemy if this goes wrong, how do we handle this. He had a phenomenal understanding and thinking capability, and he would imagine all the possible enemy attacks and surprises and strategies accordingly. So when enemy attacks unexpectedly, or if strategy A does not work, he has already thought through strategy B, strategy C, strategy D, and he will execute accordingly and is able to command his team accordingly. One of the best stories that we all have to read is about how Shivaji killed Afzal Khan, the general of Adil Shah. It's a mind-boggling story, and and within 6 months, he kind of doubled his territory with amazing war strategies. Leaders are self-disciplined, very important skill. So when you say disciplined, we often use it in a term of punishment or reining and improper behavior, whereas discipline is equal to freedom, right? Discipline creates power. Discipline leads to more flexibility and control over your every aspect of your life. Discipline creates great leaders. Self-discipline is a learnable quality. You can say that's just the way I am and struck its importance. It doesn't work that way. People often say that, that's the way I am. It doesn't really, those things don't really work. Peter Drucker emphasizes that irrespective of whether you are a naturally born leader or not, in the greater scheme of things, the only thing that matters is the self-development and self-discipline, period. We can see many leaders amongst us who are so focused on their self-care, like, getting up early in the morning, doing yoga, exercises. I know a lot of leaders who don't compromise on their exercise schedule at all. Whatever time it is, they find at least half an hour to 45 minutes a day to exercise. Yan Chandra, he ran his full marathon at the age of 44. And also leaders are very disciplined in terms of respecting the time, managing the time, and being on schedule, etc., etc. Right? Leaders are purpose and values driven. They are very action and result oriented. I'm not going to emphasize more on that, but it's very important. We all have a purpose and working towards it. For example, in our own Mysuru, we have this only Sanskrit daily called Sudharma, which they got last year. The couple got the Padma Shri Award, Mr. Sambat Kumar and Mr. Lakshmi. This was an idea that was started 51 years back. Where they wanted to make sure that Sanskrit reaches every household, and they persevered. That was the purpose that was actually handed over to Mr. Sampath Kumar, and he continued that journey against all odds. It's very difficult to work when we don't have the support system. But he persevered, he continued, and he held to that purpose. And today they have been recognized by Padma Shri. We have a lot of such examples around us. Values are very fundamental. These are universal. If a leader is not honest, fair, ethical, moral, and a man of high integrity, he cannot sustain long as a successful leader at all. It is one of the most important aspects of leadership. The leader should not only hold strong values, he should also demonstrate the same in every opportunity. This is critical to build the trust, and when there is trust, you can have the followers to walk up to you, walk with you till the end of the earth. If leaders are not driven by values and want to win any cost, we'll have debacles like Enron, Satyam. These are because people are not holding to their values. So it's very, very important, my dear friends. Purpose, values are very, very important. Leaders are always active and focused on outcomes. They continuously take action. For example, if you look at, I gave the example of Jamshedji Tata. Right? If you had just dreamt and had not done anything, right? If you had not moved the things, he had not moved the idol, then nothing would have happened, right? So he didn't sit idle. He made things happen. He explored the idea and latched onto it. So leaders, they try it, they do it, and they fix it. They need action, they need progress, and they need to see results, and extremely restless of inaction. Leaders are change agents and they are committed to win. Very important. Today's leadership is, because there's only thing that is constant in this world, my dear friends, is change. More change and fast-paced change. Change management has shifted gears from a specialty area to a very, very key leadership quality. Today, playing the role of a change agent has never been more important. Failing to do so has been proved costly to many. A lot of companies have closed because they were not able to act in time. The leaders are not able to change, at the right time. For example, what happened to, Kodak? They were the pioneers in the film, camera film industry, right? But when the change shift to digital happened, they already had a team that had actually worked towards it, but they did not see the change coming. And because of that, they kind of today, it's become such a huge organization, become very small, right? They have kind of completely lost their market share. Also happened with Apple. When Apple came, Nokia, the phone business. I remember the leader, the Nokia CEO, coming to a press conference and saying that he said, we didn't do anything wrong, but we just didn't see the change coming. So it's very, very important that leaders to act, be the change agent, and also make sure that they are very committed to winning. It does not mean that they are not accept failure, but their every step is towards the goal. They are always focusing on winning. For example, they work relentlessly to make sure that they win in their endeavor. Moving on, leaders are courageous and resilient. Very, very important quality. Post-pandemic, this has been a super critical skill, and we have seen many leaders emerging in adversity. A courageous leader is one who is capable of making themselves better and stronger when the stakes are high and circumstances turn against that person. It does not mean such leaders do not have fear. They do have fear. All of us have fear. But they make a conscious choice to overcome the fear, hesitation, and move forward instead of backing out. It is the courage to initiate action and not wait for someone else to do something. Jamshedji Tata again, he decided, he knew all the circumstances that were prevailing during that time, but he had a phenomenal courage to move forward. So this is very, very important quality of a leader. One of the areas where we really need courage, my dear friends, is when we are making business decisions that are going to impact life, resources, and which cannot be reversed, and when we cannot accurately predict the outcome of it, right? During this pandemic, a lot of leaders had to make a lot of business decisions, and they are able to, for example, even the decision to make vaccine in-house by Modi ji, it could have gone any side, right? It could have worked against us. But so it takes a lot of courage to make such decisions. I have a very interesting clip to show you from one of the greatest generals of India, Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw. Just share him out.
Fear is a natural phenomenon like hunger and sex. Anyone who says he is not frightened is a liar, except perhaps the Gorkha. Everyone is frightened. It is one thing to be frightened and quite another to show fear. It's when your knees are knocking and your teeth are chattering and you're about to make your own geography. That's when the real leader comes out. If once you show fear in front of men that you may be commanding, it doesn't matter whether they're soldiers, they're clerks, they're labor, there are students, once you show fear, you should quit. Now again, General D'Souza said, I must give some examples from my own life. This was in Burma in 1942. I was commanding a Sikh company, big tough chaps, very fond of them. I had a man called Sohan Singh, big man, stood about 6'4". He had been promoted many times to Lance Naik, to Naik, and every time, because he was a Badmash, he was broken. We'd had lots of casualties and we had to make promotions. So we had a promotion conference with the commanding officer, and Sohan Singh's name came up, and I said, no use making him, he'll be broken tomorrow. So he was passed over. The conference finished, names were published. I came back to my Basha, where my company was in the jungle, and I found my senior Subedar, Balwant Singh, terribly worried. And he said, Saab, Sohan Singh ko kaid kar diya. I said, क्यों क्या हुआ? उसने बोला कि आज आपको साहब गोली मारेगा. So I said, oh, अच्छा, पेशी होगी. So a stool was put in, a table was put there, and Sohan Singh was marched up in front of me. Sohan Singh was at that time a light machine gunner, and light machine gunners carried pistols, and his pistol was taken away from him. So he was marched up in front of me. The usual charge was read out. And I said, Sohan Singh, kya baat hai? Saab, galti ho gaya. So I said, tumne bola कि तू हमको गोली मारेगा. So I picked up the pistol, loaded it, walked up to him, handed the pistol to him. I said, तेरा दिल है मारने का, मारो. And he said, nahi saab, galti ho gaya. So I gave him a tight slap. I said, case dismissed, jao bhago. I went off to the mess, had my dinner, came back, and everybody in the company was very worried. And the Subedar Saab, Balwant Singh said, nahi saab, aaj raat aapko goli marega. So I shouted out, Sohan Singh, kidhar hai? Sohan Singh came along. अच्छा सोन सिंह, आज रात मेरा बादशाह पर तुम सेंट्री होगा और कल सुबह 5 बजे एक मग्गा चाय और एक मग्गा गर्म पानी दाढ़ी बनाने के लिए। कोई शक? बेशक, पक। I went in there. I was woken up in the morning by Son Singh with a mug of tea and a mug of hot water, and he followed me like a lamb throughout the conflict. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you think I wasn't frightened, you're mistaken. I was terrified. But if I hadn't done that, and put Son Singh in the clink or something like that, everybody would have said, Dekha, hamara saab darta hai. Just an example of this. How often during riots and all that, some young sergeant with nothing but a little stick in his hand has walked in and quelled everything by showing courage. So physical courage is essential to leadership. You needn't be foolhardy like I was. I was very young. I don't know whether I do it today. But physical courage is essential.
That was Manik Shah for you in his typical style. So leaders are great communicators. It's very important that leaders communicate their thoughts in a very unambiguous manner and make sure that they get their team aligned and march towards the goal, right? So I have two speeches for you that I want to play quickly. One is from our own Netaji. It is one of the rarest speeches you can just to hear how the clarity of his thoughts.
We are conscious that the soil of India is going to be the last theatre of war in this part of the world. Friends, I do not know how many of us who are going to participate in the coming battle will survive to see India free. But whether we survive or not, whether we individually live to see India free or not, we are confident that India shall be free. We are confident that Anglo-American imperialism will be wiped out of India. We are confident that the menace that now hangs over East Asia will be removed once for all.
One of the rarest speeches of Netaji. Here is another one by Martin Luther King Jr. He is one of the famous civil rights activists who kind of rewrote the history of America. Just listen to the clarity of his speech in terms of.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Just wanted to show how clearly they are communicating their teams. That speech changed the entire course of civil rights fight in America. Moving on, the next quality is leaders are very focused, they are creative and very patient. So leaders are very creative in solving the problems. They are very patient, because patient is one of the key skills that we would need even in the future generation, because I think the generation is really restless and they want to see things happen very fast. I have seen kids talking. They want they have been joined the job just few months ago, but they are not seeing any purpose and they want to leave the job. So this is one important skill that the future leaders should continue to have, willing to wait for the right result at the right time, right? Next, leaders are emotionally intelligent. They build championship teams. It is said good leaders always surround themselves with smart people and champion teams, right? So show me your team and I will tell you how good leader you are. This is a very famous quote. Look at the history of kings, leaders, they always have smart people around them. Right from Ramayana, Mahabharata, talk to our own historical leaders like Chandragupta Maurya had Kautilya Shivaji, Alan Mulale of Ford, John Chambers of Cisco. They all had a fantastic team supporting them, and they built championship teams, right? And these things are both of them are interconnected. If you are not emotionally intelligent, it's very difficult to see through what is not being said, and at the same time, build a championship team, right? So leaders are emotionally very intelligent, and they're able to build championship teams who can really go around and create wonders. Leaders persevere, they find opportunities in adversity. I want to just give you an example of one of the stories that caught my attention a few days back. You know, there is this there's a leader called Karan Bose. He is the founder of a company called Hula Global. They're basically into textile and apparel company, but they diversified and moved to manufacture of PPE kits, N95 masks, face shields, etc. during pandemic. They saw the opportunity, and they in India didn't have too many PPE manufacturers at that time, and they started manufacturing N95s, which kind of really helped the country to go domestic in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and it was their contributions were very well recognized. The company invested significantly to expand its manufacturing capacity, right? They from zero N95 masks in March of 2020, they moved on to produce almost a crore masks monthly by end of 2020. So this is a kind of famous, this kind of, the finding opportunities and adversity is one of the key skills that leaders should have. Leaders are visible, right? So leaders have to be visible. If you look at any war, be it the famous Alexander, the Napoleon, Shivaji, they were all visible to their teams. Even today, if you look at it, just compare between how Modi ji is communicating and how Manmohan Singh are in terms of visibility perspective, right? You will see Modi ji most, often is always visible. He's talking through Mann Ki Baat, he's in social media, he's in every other platform. And this is what really matters. The research says that at least 25% of the leaders' time should be spent on the field. Look at the military generals. Some of the top CEOs of the big conglomerates. Most of the time they spend their time on the field, right? The next is the leaders lead by example. Very very important. When we look up to leader, we not only look at what is said, we also look at what is not being said by the leader, right? So 80% of our communication happens through our body language, my dear friends. So it's very important leaders lead by example. Here is a very interesting interesting story that was narrated by our president, late Mr. Abdul Kalam.
I will give one incident. This is all of you who are assembled here, all of you. Remember this incident. 1979, SLV-3 satellite launch vehicle, I was the project director, mission director. My mission is to put the satellite in the orbit. Thousands of people worked nearly 10 years. I reached the Sriharikota, and it's in the launch pad. Countdown was going on. T-minus 4 minutes, T-minus 5 minutes, T-minus 1 minute, T-minus 40 seconds. Computer put a hold. Don't launch it. Computer says don't launch it. I am the mission director. I have to take a decision. Everything is on. Behind me there are 6 experts. They saw computer database coming in and screen, and they see the pictures in the screen. They said there's a problem. The problem is there's a leakage in the system, in the control system. But immediate calculation, no problem. We have got sufficient fuel and oxidation for control system. It controls the rocket to the required attitude, and we can go ahead. Now, of course, my expert's view, but I took the decision. Problem is mine. Finally, I took a decision. I bypassed the computer. I launched the system. Okay, I launched the system. This fellow went. First stage worked is a 4-stage rocket, and second stage got mad. it went to spin. Instead of putting the satellite in the orbit, it put in the Bay of Bengal. 1979, it was a failure. It was a failure. First time I experienced my failure. How do you manage the failure? Success I can manage. So at that time, a great man, a great leader, Professor Satish Dhawan, he comes to me, I'm very tired working nearly for months. He wakes me up, come, let us go for a press conference. Press is meeting there, like this, number of people, world press, with photos, this and that, all the gadgets, they are there. I was really frightened, I will be the culprit, because I'm the project director, mission director. What Satish Dhawan said, chairman, Indian Space Research Organization, said, dear friends, we have failed today. It's the first time I have to give all the success, all the failure is, I want to support my technologists and scientists and staff so that next year they succeed. So he took the whole blame himself. And then media asked, you have put Bay of Bengal so many crores, you have put it like that, a lot of criticism. He received the criticism. He assured them in a year we will succeed with our team. It's a very good team. Next year, here only interesting happened. Next year, July 18, 1980, when he succeeded, Professor Dhawan said, you go and conduct the press conference. Do you follow what it means? It means when the failure occurred, the leader took it up. When the success came, he gives to his team. That's the first.
So that is a great leadership example by Professor Satish Dhawan. So moving on, leaders are great listeners. Listening is very, very important skill. You have seen, I will just quickly ram through, my dear friends, because in the interest of time, it is said that, as much as 50 to 60% of time is spent on listening. Hearing is and listening are two different things, and leaders have to spend a lot of time listening, right? When you listen attentively, you not only hear the spoken words, also what is not being said. A casual attitude of listening could be disastrous, right? One of the things that I want to share as a story is that all of you must have heard the famous Battle of Waterloo. It kind of changed the entire history of Europe in 1815. It was a Sunday afternoon. Napoleon was fighting, the Prince of Prussia. It's a fierce war going on. Napoleon on the kind of in a very retreating position. Napoleon sent a message to his Marshal Grouchy, who was in command of 30,000 French soldiers and was only an hour away from the battlefield. He had to send a message quickly. The messenger did not pay proper attention. The message that reached Grouchy was so unclear that he did not know what he was asked to do. He didn't do anything, so he just did nothing. He just sat there with 30,000 leaders, just a couple of hills away, which is just 1 hour away from the battlefield. And Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo. And this changed the history of Europe, Europe completely, just because of the lack of clarity in the messages, right? Leaders are curious, they're learners, they're leaders, and humorous. Very important quality. Humor plays a very, very important role. There's a survey that was done and which says that the effectiveness of the team actually goes up when the leader is humorous by almost 27%. Right? It's very important that the leaders also have to be continuously curious. They have to ask all kind of questions. They have to be constant learners. This is kind of applicable not only today, it will always be applicable, all the time. Right? So leaders always want to know. At the same time, leaders are also ardent readers. For example, if you look at Bill Gates reads at least 50 books a year, 50 books a year. And if you look at some of the other leaders, some of the leaders read at least 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day. They are kind of, voracious readers. Some of these skills are very, very important. Leaders are caring and empathetic. I just want to quickly tell you a story. It was again in 1924 when when Tata Steel went into difficult times because of huge debt and less demand. At that time, Dorabji Tata, who was the son of Jamshedji Tata, he was running the company. The company was almost at the brink of bankruptcy. The survival looked very difficult. The company did not even have money to pay the next month's salary. So what Mr. Dorabji does is that he goes there and just entire his wealth, which was close to 1 crore at that point of time, to obtain a loan from the Imperial Bank of India to run, continue Tata Steel. It included, Meherbai Tata's jewelry, which was like, it was almost double size of the, the fabled Kohinoor diamond. And that is the kind of, empathetic leader that we need. That is the kind of care that they have shown for the people. It's the kind of really that is what actually drives the employee loyalty. And the other opposite of being unempathetic is that, one more story that happened very recently, probably all of you have noticed. Vishal Garg is the CEO of a company called Better.com. He recently laid off 900 people over a Zoom call. It is so unprofessional and unempathetic. He just got into the meeting, told them that what's going on in the business. He's forced to make a very hard decision, and told the team that if all of you are in the Zoom call, that means all of you have been laid off. It is widely spoken. This incident, it is there in all the social media platforms. Moving on, leaders grow leaders, very important. In our organization, we used to have a succession plan where all the leaders are supposed to identify, three candidates for kind of their potential replacement, and then both internal and external, then identify who will fit in, what are their skills, internally, and what is the gap, and how do we really help them to coach, mentor, create the right opportunity for them to help them to the grow to the next level, right? So this is one of the very, very key skills. Steve Jobs developed Tim Cook as his successor. Steve Ballmer groomed Satya Nadella as successor, correct? So we see a lot of these examples. Moving on, so what are Indian leaders focusing on? What is their approach? What is their style? So it says 61% of Indian leaders said envisioning and articulating a path to the future, strategic thinking and guiding as their priority. 50% said inspirational, resilience, entrepreneurial as their priority. Only 22% said understanding competitors and markets, managing stakeholders. There's a massive shift in terms of the way we are doing the business, the way we are running our businesses, which is a welcome change. There's leadership all around us, media friends. These are all the people who got Padma awards, Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan. And there's so much of leaders among us with that. All of us can get inspired, and all of us can get motivated, and we should also teach our students also to get motivated from these great people. Moving on, let's move to the next section of my presentation, which is talking about the future. So we spoke about the definitions, we spoke about the leadership styles, we spoke about the leadership qualities. Now we are talking about what is that lies in the future that for the leaders, right? It's going to be, so before we move to what is lie in the future, let's understand the generations, right? There's quite a bit of definitions that have been put together. What constitute future leaders, right? If you look at, there's a builder's definition for kind of before 1946. Baby boomers are like between 1946 and 1964. Generation X is between 1965 and 1979. Generation Y and Generation Z, which are between 1980 to 2009. So these are pretty much are going to be the future leaders. Predominantly, it's going to be Generation Y, and which are also called the millennials, right? And Generation Alpha is some those who are born after 2010 and between 2010 and 2024, right? So look at their exposure. Their exposure levels are completely different, right? So the kind of the social markers they have seen, the iconic cause they have exposed to. For example, Generation Z are exposed to Tesla. Generation Alpha will be into autonomous vehicles. The music devices are completely different. From Walkman to iPod to Spotify, there's a huge transformation in terms of the trend. The leadership styles are different. They're mostly, if you look at Generation Y, it is predominantly guiding. Generation Z empowering. Generation Alpha will be looking for inspiring leadership. Ideal leader is one who supports, for Generation Y, whereas Generation Z looks up to the leader as a collaborator, and Generation Alpha looks up to the leader as a co-creator, right? And the learning style is predominantly participative in Generation X, interactive, multimodal, and virtual. So there's a lot of, the reason why I'm showing this slide is also because we need to understand where these future leaders are coming from, what is their background, what is kind of exposure they are getting, right? So I want to show you, there was a survey that was done. This is something that is done by DDI, which is very widely recognized survey. They talked to around 16,000 leaders globally, around 2,000 plus HR professionals, 1,700 organizations. They talk about across generations, across countries, across leadership levels, industries, race, ethnicity, and gender. Right. So this is a very, very important survey that actually talks about the future of leadership. In terms of the leadership forecast. So if you really look at it, talent problems plague the CEOs. This was if developing the next generation of leaders is the biggest challenge of the future leaders. The CEOs are saying that developing the next generation of leaders will be the biggest challenge. Followed by recession. Attracting and retaining top talent is another big challenge that the CEOs are facing. And 55% of the CEOs say that next generation finding next generation leaders is going to be a biggest task, right? And also there's a huge transformation in the workplace. The CHR was the survey actually asked them what will change most in next 10 years. They said that need to develop and upskill employees. It is the biggest change that we are seeing. 84% of the HROs think that 84 leaders upskilling is very, very important. Flexible work environment, it's going to be another big change that we'll see. Diversity in the workspace. CEOs got fired because they were not very serious about diversity in America. Leadership aspirations of employees, it's also going to these are the top 4 priorities that will actually change the workplace. You will also see that a lot of vulnerability in terms of talking about healthcare. If you say are they prepared, they are not prepared enough. Their ability to react for these kind of changes is very, very low. Whereas if you say look at insurance is kind of pretty much prepared. Pharma industry is struggling. Professional services okay, and technology is kind of prepared. Right. Overall, if you say only 35% of the leaders said that they are effective at managing this change. There's a massive transformation that is happening in the workplace, and it is very important that the role of being a change agent is more important than ever before. Just as an example, if you look at how the workplace has evolved, from 9 to 5 work, we have moved to work anytime, work any place. Bring your own equipment. You are focused on outputs rather than the inputs. It's like relies on the technologies more than emails. So democratizing learning and teaching compared to depending on the corporates to give them the training, right? So there's a massive change in the way the workplace is evolving. So here is another view of the leadership, the disparity in the leadership quality, right? So if you look at this is actually basically talks about how is the quality of the leaders in the organizations. What do leaders think and what do HR think, right? If you look at it, there's a huge gap there's always been a gap between what HR thinks and what leaders think, but the gap seems to be quite widening here. If you look at the latest survey, they're saying well, HR thinks only the quality is 28%, whereas leaders think it is 48%, right? So this is one of the largest leadership gap, which is kind of really alarming, but it also means that there's a lot more work to do. And let's look at your ability to fill the leadership positions, right? If you look at the bench strength, that in 2011 was 18%, but it has dropped to 11% in 2020, right? And this basically means that the ability of the organization to fill the leadership roles if a leader leaves is kind of very, very low. It is kind of really concerning from the statistics perspective. But if you really look at from the overall, it's only about it's a huge opportunity for India to create more global leaders, right? I will come to that in my next subsequent slides. And also in terms of the digital skills, if you look at it, leaders are less effective on digital skills, but as they are very good at some of these soft skills like influencing, building talent, managing change, etc. Right? 19% of the CEOs feel they are very prepared for digital information. 81% of the leaders, they don't think they are well prepared for the digital transformation. Look at this, how CEOs rate leadership quality, 34% to 42%, right? First level. Mid-level, CEOs think 38%, whereas other leaders think 48% in terms of the leadership quality. And the senior level leadership seem to be thinking they are doing pretty well, and they are actually rating 58% against 55%, which is still okay, which is kind of acceptable range. But only 1 in 3 CEOs say their organization's frontline leadership quality is really very good and excellent. Let's move. Let's look at what are the key trends that are actually shaping the future leaders, right? Key thing is artificial intelligence. We have spoken about it. It's been a very hot topic. Uh, so there's a saying that technology gives rich better of what they already have, but technology gives poor what they cannot dream of. That is the power of technology when used wisely and for the larger good. PwC did an annual survey of CEOs of around 1,400 CEOs globally. 42% agreed that AI will have a larger impact than the internet, and 21% strongly agreed to that. Now, PwC actually estimated $15.7 trillion in global GDP gains from artificial intelligence in 2020. This is huge. So 2021 has been a great year for artificial intelligence. A lot of changes have happened. AI adoption rate has gone up from 4% to 14%. Some of the key elements like language automation, trusting the decisions made based on the data, right? We have been making a lot of progress on these areas. So if you really look at it, from the industrial revolution to space exploration, technology is all set to redefine the future. As some of the exciting, there are a lot of exciting technologies also, coming our way. Like we are talking about metaverse. The growth rate of self-driving cars can reach up to 20-30% in 2030. There's advanced robotics in making. At least 10% of the people will wear smart clothes. There's just a lot of changes that are happening on the AI and technology front, my dear friends. So this is going to be a major trend in the future. Just quickly listen to what the leaders have got to say about the technology trends.
Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft are all moving ahead at a great speed in improving this artificial intelligence software. So it's very exciting. Software is going to solve that, where it'll look at all the new information and present to you, knowing about your interests, what would be most valuable. So making us more efficient.
We're focusing on what we talked about, on autonomous systems. And we sort of see it as the mother of all AI projects. So autonomy is something that's incredibly exciting for us. We'll see where it takes us.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if someday we got to the point where there were robots every place? They were running farms, they were running Apple, they were running Berkshire Hathaway, and all you had to do was one person could punch a button at the start of every morning, and all the goods and services that we're getting now would be turned out by robots.
It is seeping into our lives in all sorts of ways that we just don't notice. We're just getting better and better at it, and we're seeing that happen in every aspect of our lives, from medicine to transportation to how electricity is.
AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. I think of it as something more profound than electricity or fire. And anytime you work with technology, you need to learn to harness the benefits and while minimizing the downsides. Stepping back, when you think about a lot of problems in the world today, it's because we typically have a constraint on resources. AI, for the first time, I think over time, offers a different construct. Things which are constrained and look like a zero-sum game today may not be so in the future. Take education, for example. It's really difficult to educate people in a cost-effective way. AI may fundamentally change that equation. It may make it possible for us to have clean, cheap, renewable energy for the future.
The idea that there's going to be a general AI overlord that subjugates us or kills us all, I think is not something to worry about. I think that is overhyped. First of all, we don't know, we're nowhere close to knowing how to build a general AI, something that could set its own objectives. But second of all, I think it's unlikely that such a thing's first instincts would be to exterminate us. So I'm optimistic about that one, and certainly don't think we need to worry about it today.
So some of the key trends that we are seeing in 2022, artificial intelligence, we looked at it, data science, edge computing, extended, reality, blockchain, human augmentation, voice technology, drones, computer vision, bioinformatics. There are a lot of changes that are coming our way, which is going to be a key trend for 2030 and beyond. explosive pace of technological change that we are seeing today, it's going to be one of the key challenges. It is just right alongside of AI and technology, right? How we live and work has drastically changed in last few years. In just last 5 years, we don't have to talk about 20 or 30 years ago, right? And the change, it's there's change everywhere. It could be climate change, globalization, diversity, dozens of other things. The change is constant and always happened. But what's really different this time is the pace of change. There is a quote saying that the pace of change that we will see today would be the slowest ever in the future. So that is the speed at which the change is happening around us, and digital adoption is happening around us. Banks have transitioned to remote sales. Grocery stores have shifted to online ordering. Medicines are being made available online. Schools in many locals have pivoted to 100% online teaching, right? And so this is going to be a major trend for future and is going to remain, right? Then moving on, purpose and meaning. I think one of the things, remember the generation slide I just quickly touched upon. Purpose and meaning has become more important now and would be even more in future compared to the past. Generation Y, Z, and also the millennials will ask a lot of questions why we should join your organization. They'll ask a lot of questions during the interview. What is your corporate social responsibility? What is your contribution to the environment? They're going to ask all kind of questions, and they would all want to understand how leaders can make a difference, and how leaders are doing in terms of what is the leader's purpose, and how are they doing in terms of meeting their purpose, right? And one of the famous quotes that Bernard Tyson, the former chairman and CEO of Taser, he said that companies of the future can no longer think that they can just exist. Significant companies of the future cannot just exist in the little bread box, in this isolated place. We are part of greater society, and a growth society is part of us. I think the trend of when and how we engage in the bigger societal issues will continue to be part of the future of leadership, right? So purpose and meaning is going to play a very important role. There's a new landscape, talent landscape that is coming up. Talent will be a make or break for the companies in the future, my dear friends. Competition for talent would be fiercer, and the competition for customers, right? So again, you looked at some of those data points where I said 22% of the time is spent by the leader on competitors and managing the stakeholders, right? So it's going to be that the fight is going to be in the future for the right talent. The Korn Ferry survey, one of the which said that there's going to be 85 million global talent shortage by 2030, which is going to cost around $8.5 trillion equivalent, right? 45% of the employers reported there's difficulty in filling the roles. There is twice the number of boomers returning compared to the number of millennials of Gen Z entering the workplace. There are a lot of changes happening in the talent landscape, and it's going to be the only solution to this is tech literacy and tech fluency. We need a lot of human skills like communication and other skills that we spoke about. Accenture actually published a future skills report, which actually contains 15 skills, out of which 5 of them are technology driven, whereas 10 of them are kind of completely people related, right? There's communication, presentation, storytelling, self-confidence, self-respect. These are also some of the key skills that are going to define the new talent landscape, right? Moving on quickly, morality, ethics, and transparency. This is going to be one of the key areas as well. There's going to be a lot of transparency, the way you are running the business, the way the leaders are visible, and people are always watching the leaders. Future leaders must practice constant reflection and transparency, not just by themselves but for their teams. There should be no place for leaders to hide in their organizations, right? 86% of millennials who are going to be 75% of the 2030 workforce consider that it is a top priority to be part of an organization that conducts itself in an ethical and responsible way. Globalization, world is becoming a global city, right? There are a lot of, as technology grows, the world becomes more connected, right? And it's becoming smaller. And each country used to be its own economy, but now it's like it's become work with, communicate instantly with people all over the world, right? World is becoming one city where languages, cultures, religion, etc. is not a barrier anymore, right? So globalization is bringing a lot of geopolitical issues as well. At the same time, it's also bringing a lot of great opportunities, right? The future leaders need to understand trends and adopt their leadership approach for changes in the way we think, we work, and we live, right? So this is going to be very, very important. These are the top 6 trends that are going to shape the future, my dear friends, and this is something that we need to watch out for, and the leaders have to be completely ready to adopt and perform in this kind of a situation, right? Moving on to the challenges of future leaders. What would be the key challenges of future leaders? Some of them we actually briefly touched upon, right? There was a survey that was conducted, and we looked at different levels of organization. Right from individual contributors, managers, senior executives, and CEOs. For the individual contributors, they said, attracting and retaining talent is their challenge. Reskilling and upskilling is their challenge. Adapting to technology is the challenge. Whereas, as this has been a constant challenge across all the career levels. Whereas, if you look at the CEOs, for the CEOs, it was keeping up with the overall pace of change, leading diverse teams, adapting to technology and advancements and changes. And these are the key challenges that the future leaders are facing, right? And if you look at it, some of the statistics, the challenge of leading diverse teams is a big challenge for a CEO, whereas attracting and retaining talent is a big challenge for an individual contributor and also for the managers and senior executives. So these are going to be the key challenges in the future. So I'm kind of trying to compartmentalize the key challenges between two segments. One is the futurized, the other one is the humanized, right? When I say futurized, it's all about short-term to long-term thinking, adapting to technology, keep up with the pace of change, move away from the status quo. We talked about, the leaders have to have a larger picture. They should start, they should think beyond the quarters. Some of the, historically, if you look at it, we run that business on a quarterly basis. If you perform 2 quarters, you are in the organization, otherwise you are out. Leaders have to develop a future thinking perspective, right? And adapt to technology is very, very important. We touched upon the changes of the pace of change that is happening in the technology space, keeping up with the pace of change, again, with all the changes that are happening around us, and moving away from the status quo, and challenging the status quo is one of the key challenges. It will not be looked at as a negatively, but it's going to be, it has to be looked at it positively, and making sure that we address those concerns, right? Then moving on to the humanized side of it, leading diverse team, we looked at some of those data points. Leading diverse teams is one of the key challenges of the leaders. Reskilling and upskill, this is one of the biggest challenges. In fact, Accenture, PwC, they're all investing very heavily in reskilling and upskilling their employees. Attract and retaining talent, which is another big challenge. Focusing on doing good, I think this is very important. I touched upon the CSR aspect of it. Focusing on doing good to the society, doing good to the employees is going to be very, very important challenge in the future. Make the organization human. This is being human is going to be one of the biggest challenges as more technological changes happen, more digitalization happen. People get disconnected, and when you are face to face, day to day, one-to-one personal interactions are not happening. Having that human touch or connection is going to be even more challenging. So look, moving on. So how do we know what kind of mindsets that future leaders need to have, right? So because when I say mindsets, so when I say mindset, it's basically the mindset a leader think when it means how a leader think when in terms of shapes and what he does, how does it influence and how does he act. This is very, very important. Recall the leadership styles we spoke about, right? Authoritarian versus servant. The impact of culture is completely different. Authoritarian creates toxic culture, whereas a servant leadership creates more human culture, right? And so what kind of mindset a future leader should have? It should be a culture of an explorer. It should be a mindset of an explorer, right? Exploration starts from the curiosity, and leaders need to be curious. I touched upon this in one of the earlier slides as well. Michael Dell of Dell Computers was asked to name one single attribute to succeed in future, and he said it is curiosity. As kids, we all have grown up with some sense of curiosity, but as we go through our education system and doing jobs, corporations, actually it reduces. I think it is very, very important for the future leaders to be curious, keep learning and keep asking questions, and keep challenging the status quo. This is the mindset that the future leader should have. Next one, the chef. Great chefs are actually, experts in balancing the ingredients to create perfectly flavored dishes. Similarly, leaders of the future need to balance the two most important ingredients in any business: humanity, and technology. This is called human it, right? The human side of the work. The human side of the work is all of the issues relating to people, whereas like employee experience, relationships, loyal customers, and social impact that come from that. Whereas like other ingredients of technology, like how the work is done, how the decisions are made, what kind of software we are doing, devices, automation, these are actually the technical side of it, right? The IT side of it. So these two have to be balanced, and the future leader has to be has to be operate like a should be operating like a chef, where he's balancing both the human side of it as well as the technology side of it. Moving on, the servant, right? We touched upon the servant leadership. The servant here means to serve, or the mindset of a service genuinely, right? Not in a negative connotation that we use it as a servant. For decades, leaders have been always giving instructions. They had a different hierarchical pyramids. Today the organization has become flat. The expectation, I also touched upon the generation slide, where the expectation of the leaders for the new generation is going to be a collaborator and a co-creator, right? So service to, when I say, it's basically it has got three aspects. One is that service to employee, service to the customers, and service to the self, because its self-care is also equally important. And I just want to give you an example of one of the CEOs who actually shared in one of these meetings, where he said that he was just walking in the floor and he saw one of the employees actually crying in the corner, right? So he just went and asked what happened, and she just happened to tell him that her husband has been diagnosed with a terminal cancer and the survival rate is only 1 out of 20, right? And the CEO immediately, what he said is he looked at his contacts and find out who can help to make sure, and he guided her to the doctor and personally followed through to make sure that, and eventually the positive side of the story is that her husband survived. I think the leader have to be extremely empathetic and caring and operate like a servant. He's actually for service of his teams. Moving on, I touched upon the globalization earlier. We are all global citizens. World is becoming a big, small city. The way you see it, it's all becoming a big city with everyone is connected. Everyone has a mobile devices. It's going to be very, leaders have to have the global mindset. They should not be, very restrained to their regional or national level. They all these languages, culture. Uh, you know, um, their individual preferences should not be a barrier at all in terms of in future. It's going to be global, local, I would say, right? So this is one of the key mindset that a leader of the future should have. Moving on to the key skills the future leader should have. The leader should be a futurist. When we say futurist, it doesn't mean he can predict the future, but they can look at various possibilities to prepare themselves and their organizations for what is coming down the pipeline. Futurists don't just react to trends. They proactively shape the future and lead the change. Remember the in 2000 2005 time frame. People used to talk about Internet of Things. The CEOs used to talk about. I remember John Chambers talking about IoTs, but today IoT is a reality. So futurists are like they are able to see what is coming our way and able to proactively lead the change for the organization to be prepared, right? The Yoda, the Yoda is a very famous character in the movie Star Wars. I'm sure some of you would have seen that movie. Yoda is an excellent example of a great leadership. Not only he is humble in character and in speech, he typifies what a great servant leader is, right? So the leader has to develop emotional intelligence. He should be very empathetic. He should be self-aware. The skills that were actually long looked down are becoming very, very important skills in the future generation. So the leader has to operate like a Yoda and be wise and able to drive the change during the difficult times the future will throw us. Moving on, translator, right? So the leader has to operate. Leader has to be. There's going to be communication we touched upon, right? The skill of the translator is all about communication and building bridges between people. Communication well in the future means being able to share a persuasive message clearly and concisely. If the message is not conveyed properly, and if the purpose is, then the purpose is not served. There was a survey that was done where, how many people in an organization understand the organization strategy, and the result was really very astonishing. 85% of the people said they don't understand the organization strategy at all, and 10% said they kind of somewhat understand, and only the 5% who are kind of in the thick and thin of strategy discussions or part of the bigger leadership team, they kind of understood the organization strategy. I think this is where the leader has to play a very, very important role in terms of making sure that he is able to communicate well, and making sure what he is aspiring to is executed well on the ground by the people. Great leaders are great coaches. Future leaders must be great coaches, which means knowing how to motivate, engage, and inspire people, how to create other leaders to work across generations and cultures. This is going to be one of the key skill of the future. The technology teenager, I touched upon the aspect of curiosity. The leaders had to operate like teenagers. They have to be. They don't need to be expert or in coding or software, etc. But they need to have a very strong understanding of technology and how to use it. Right? Teens don't typically read the instruction manual; they just figure it out. Same way, the future leaders should take the same approach, surround themselves with, tech-savvy people, and they have to continuously upgrade themselves on all the technological changes. Okay, so these are the key skills that we have touched upon. So coming to the end of my presentation, my dear friends, I think this decade actually belongs to India. I strongly believe that this is one of the great times to be in India. There is a strong GDP growth. We have had pandemic that kind of slowed down our progress, but there's fantastic. India is all set to be a fight-eater economy sooner or later. Business and growth-friendly policy making is happening. There's a high focus on digitization, innovation, and sustainability at the policy making level. More importantly, world would depend on India for skilled workforce. There's a strong young workforce with median age of 32 with lower dependency ratios by 2030. Japan is aging, America is aging, China is aging, Europe is aging. World has to look to India for the skilled workforce, right? And all our graduates from our educational institutions will be forming part of the future workforce, and they all have all the potential to be leading the world in becoming by global leaders, right? Again, gross enrollment ratio target of 50% by 2035 by the NEP. There's a good target. There's a lot more enrollment that's going to happen in the educational institutions, in the professional education institutions. That means also more opportunity for more leaders. There's strong focus on reskilling. Educate the educators and train the trainer. This is one of the, today's NEP program is one such effort in that line, right? So there is a lot of focus being given to train the teachers, prepare the faculty for the change. There are a lot of jobs being created. India is one of the fastest growing unicorn ecosystem, more than 50 unicorns so far, and we are adding more. We are the third largest startup ecosystem. There's a major shift from semi-skilled labor-intensive workforce to semi-skilled manufacturing and skilled services. It's hybrid working as more women enter the workforce. There's a significant improvement in the per capita GDP. Corporate social responsibility. Corporate committed to investing more than 70% in the educational sector. There's also the effort being done. There's already the government is working on Vision 2047. This is India's centenary time, and government's already building an aspirational growth plan. Where India should be by 2047. So as at the end, to conclude, we looked at leadership definitions, leadership evolution, styles, qualities of a great leader, key trends shaping the future leadership challenges, the mindset and skills of future leaders, right? So I just want to quickly touch upon some of these leaders who have become the global leaders. This is Parag. This is Parag Agarwal, who is the CEO of. He is the CEO of Twitter. Mr. Krishna, he is the CEO of IBM. Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. Sundar Pichai is the CEO of Google. Mr. Rangarajan Raghuram, who is the CEO of VMware. So all this, if you look at it, all these CEOs are the global leaders who actually had an humble beginning, right? So, for example, Parag Agarwal is a BTech from IIT Bombay. Sundar Pichai is from IIT Kharagpur. Satya Nadella is from Manipal University, Mangalore, right? Arvind Krishna is from IIT Kanpur, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is all these people have kind of gone on to become the global leaders, and India is in such a situation where we have a great opportunity, my dear friends. You all as leaders play as teachers, and play a very important role in developing the future leaders who can actually go on to build the nation, right? So we need brand India needs great leaders in all walks of society, not only in the corporate world. We are we request the faculty need to bridge the gap between academia and the industry. Professional education institutions need to create more future ready leaders. Together, I think we have an opportunity here to generate, create more global leaders from our educational institutions. So when you want something, this is my favorite quote: when you want something, all the universe conspires to helping you to achieve it. I think we all have to single-mindedly focus on creating more global leaders who can actually create brand India, leaders who can contribute to the nation building. I think that is the best thing that can happen to our country. With that, I come to the end of my amendment. Sorry, I had to rush a bit in the interest of time, but I thank you for your precious time, and I really appreciate your patient hearing. I am open for any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for speaking on the importance of leadership and qualities of a great leader, relating it to the leaders from mythology and to the leaders in present world. I also thank all the participants for being part of day one session. Looking forward for your participation in tomorrow's session. Tomorrow morning session 4 will begin exactly at 9:30 a.m. So in case there are any questions, you can post on to us on the WhatsApp group, and sir will communicate to you.